Angular provides some predefined CSS classes for validation actually. So one important is we can write our own classes and configure them. And Angular provides a set of CSS validation classes. It will provide a set of CSS validation classes. So what is the specialty of these classes is these classes can identify the validation state. They can identify the validation state of form or input element and apply effects and apply effects dynamically. What is generally yesterday happened is yesterday Angular is unable to identify the state until or unless you define the state. So here we are defining the state. So we are saying that if the text box is valid, then apply this effect. If text box is invalid, then apply another effect. That's what actually we were doing. So this was the styles. These were the styles we return manually, valid style, invalid style, and we are applying those valid and invalid styles for our HTML here. By using a class binding technique, we are manually calling that and we are defining. So what we can do now is we can use predefined classes. What is the separate advantage of these predefined classes? The main purpose of the predefined classes, they can identify the state of your input element. They can identify the state of the form. Based on that, they can apply effects. Let's see, for example, so yesterday we applied the effects here. It is showing those colors because we are using this ng class. Now I will remove that. I'm not writing any classes. I'm not defining any styles. And here also, I will not define any styles. So here we don't have styles for appearance for valid or invalid. It looks normal actually. Now, one of the great advantages is Angular provides the validation classes, CSS classes. So what are those actually validation CSS classes and how we can manage them? Actually, Angular classes, what it provides for handling validation. So we have the class name and some description for this actually. The classes, CSS classes will be defined as .ng invalid. So like we have .ng valid because classes will preside with the dot. So we have ng pristine. We have like .ng dirty. We have like .ng touched. We have like .ng untouched. These are the predefined Angular classes. So what these classes will do is, so it contains a set of style attributes that are applied to any input element or form when its state is returned as invalid. The same will happen for others. That means when its state is written as valid. So when its state is written as valid. So when its state is written as pristine. So state is written as pristine, pristine. When the state is written as dirty. So when it is defined as dirty. And when the state is written as touched. So touched, touched. All these are same, touched. And the state is written as untouched. That means you don't need to tell untouched. That means you don't need to tell to which element to apply. Actually, in our previous example, we are applying to that particular element. We are applying to that particular element. So that is the reason it was working for name text box, but not for mobile text box. So now generally what we can do now here is we can simply configure the effects in this way. Just go to the style. Syntactically, how you define. So form CSS classes are applied. So form CSS class are applied by using form element, by using form element, by using form selector, actually form selector, by using form selector. That means we generally define like this. So we write like, so form dot ng valid, like this. We write like form dot ng pristine, and we need to define some set of effects. For example, input CSS classes are applied by using input selector, or any reference for input. So here by using form selector or any reference for form like ID, class, or anything. So here you define like this. That means the options are configured in this way now. Options are configured in this way. So how they are defined actually? So we have input. And if input is ng valid, then what effects you want? If input is ng touched, what effects you want? That is how we configured the classes. You don't you don't need to use any class binding technique. You don't need to use any class binding technique. What you have to do is in this CSS form validation CSS, you have to just write. So currently validation effects are not there. You have to just write if input and its Angular validation state is ng invalid, then we will put border as 1 pixel solid and red. And we have box shadow 2 pixel and 3 pixel and red. How we need to configure. And if input is ng valid, if input is ng valid, so then the same options we will change to green color. That means we are configuring into the color green. So solid green. So we are configuring to that green. We are defining that. Now important, you can observe here, I will save this. We are not applying to any element. We are not defining any class name. We are simply saying that wherever input is there and that input state is written as invalid, if it is written as invalid or valid, Angular recognizes its state and it will apply these effects directly. So that means you are not calling these classes anywhere. You are not defining, just you are saying that wherever input is there, verify the state, whether it is valid or invalid, then apply these effects. And you see all the effects are applied here. all the effects are applied here. Now, custom you have to write manually. For custom, you have to write manually because custom you created by your own, you have to write manually. Others, it will apply. Now, see here, when I'm entering John, then it is green. I'm entering mobile number, it is still red. So I said +91, then it is green. Here, we are not applying these effects either to the mobile text box. There are no classes mentioned here. So that means no dynamic classes are mentioned here. There are no dynamic classes mentioned here. We are not configuring any dynamic classes anywhere. Just we are applying directly to the input. We can apply to the entire form also. We can apply to entire form. We can configure to entire form and can define for entire form actually. So how you can do that? If you want to define for form, then we have to say, so form is suppose ng invalid. If form is ng invalid, some suppose background color, some light coral, something like this. So, and if a form is ng valid, then background color. So I kept some as light green, something like this we defined. Now, usually it is going to apply the effect, for entire form, You can see entire form. And it is having some valid data. It will be green color. We are defining for the form, entire form. If anything is invalid, then it will show the red color for the form, right? That's what generally we have the predefined classes for. The advantage is these will identify the state of your application, that means state of your form and input element, and they can directly define the effects there, configure those effects. These are actually the validation classes, means how we can configure the predefined validation classes and effects. So this you can apply directly in your previous example, the same previous example. So what we need to do is here, just for your understanding sake, here I will keep an example there. Yeah, so here I will keep an example here, form validation dot component dot css. So in that, so we need to just keep that. Yeah, we need to keep that set of styles here. Configure this set of styles. And the HTML is same. That means form validation dot component dot HTML. So it is nothing changed. It is just like exactly what we designed in the last session. The same example is configured here. That means no change. All the validations and everything are same. So this is completely how do we work and how do we handle the reactive forms. So sorry, template driven forms, how we can design and work with the template driven forms. So the advantages and the drawbacks of these template driven forms we discussed already. Now extensibility issues will be there, testing issues will be there, and they become heavy because for the view rendering, because everything is managed at the view level. Only few custom validations and all we are mentioning at the controller level and configuring at the controller level. Now we have another technique of defining the forms and working with the forms. And that is nothing but, so we need to understand about the reactive forms. So how we can deal with the reactive forms. Reactive forms, or we generally call as model driven forms, reactive or model driven forms. So let's see how do we work with reactive and model driven forms here. So this is all the template driven approach. Okay, let's say here as reactive forms, or we generally call as model driven forms, reactive or model driven forms. So what is what is the point is reactive forms provide model driven approach, actually model driven approach. That is the reason we often call them as model driven forms. What is a model driven approach? Actually, what is the concept of model driven approach? So generally, when we are using the concept of designing of application, single page application, so we have MVC framework here, we have MVVM framework here. Now, when we are dealing with MVC and MVVM like frameworks, so suppose we have data. And what we need here is we need a class. So we need a class that is actually we call as a model class. This model class represents the data we are working with. It represents the data we are working with. And we want to interact with the data in the view. Now a template driven form is directly managing the interactions with the data here. But now here in reactive forms, it will follow this approach. That means it maps to a model that is representing the data. It gets the information from the model. So model, now what is advantage of this is, so what are the advantages of this? So the technical point is they are bound to model, and any change in the model will update to the view. Technically, first point is they are bound to model, so that any change in model will update the view. And another point here is configurations of forms and controls are defined at application level. So here, why we need this approach? What is the intention of that approach? Actually, suppose we have designed the data. This is very important to understand. We have name, we have price, we have some so quantity, total, like this, something options we have. Quantity, some options are defined here. Now this is actually the data structure. This is the data structure. So this is the data structure. And in the data structure, we have the options like, generally in the data structure, what the options we will have, like we say that name in the general data structure, we have options like name is a string, and price is a number, and total is also a number, right? Quantity is also a number, like this. So now important is generally when you are directly interacting with the view, configuring with the view. In the view, you are binding this. We are binding this. So through input element, input type is equal to text. And it is to be binded for price. That means now important is it knows that. So here, observe here, the point is it is collecting the value that you entered, and it will send the value into this location. It will send the value to that particular location. But whatever the value you entered into it, actually value that you entered into it, it will be in a string form. So that means now the view, if it is binding with the data directly, it is handling the data, it is showing the data, sending the data, but it is not aware of the data structure. It is not aware of the data structure. That means it doesn't know that price is a number. It doesn't know that total is a number. It doesn't know that name is a string, because everything it treats as a string. Here, so the name is a string. So mobile is also a string. Everything it will treat as a string. So gender is a string. So this is select is also a string. So, but sometimes this even number is also a string. Actually, we are interacting with the data without making the data bound to the structure. Especially if data is coming from some data sources and we need to send the data into the data sources, then better always bind your data to the view, because what happens is later some structural changes happened in the data. Those changes are not updated to your view. View doesn't know about the data structure, it just know the data. So it doesn't know about the data structure, and view is actually a form. Everything is a string only. So if it can implicitly transition, that means it can implicitly translate the data, then it's fine. If it is unable to implicitly translate the data, then a lot of technical issues will arise. Especially if you are dealing with some data interactions, so strongly typed data structures, then we cannot prefer working with template driven forms. We always prefer working with model driven forms. In model driven forms, what happens is, so we design a model class. Actually, this model class will use a contract. It will use a contract. That means this model class will implement a contract. That contract will be of this data type. The contract will be of this data type. And we bind this model contract to our view. We bind the model contract to the view. That means now view exactly knows what type of data you are dealing with. Even when you send some string type of data, some contradictory data, it will verify that you are sending some string, and it uses explicit or implicit conversions of data, and it binds the data to the data source. So that means especially when you need such type of data structure based manipulations in the forms, so and strongly typed form for the data structure, so then you have to go with the reactive forms. That is the reason these type of forms are called model driven forms. That means a model driven form, actually model driven approach binds the view with the data structure, with the view with the data structure. So technically, so in reactive forms, what happens is configuration. So entire configuration of forms and controls are defined at application logic. Application logic level are defined at application logic level. That means you can say that they are defined in the controller. They are defined at the controller level, application logic level. Controls are created, controls are configured, forms are created, forms are configured, everything at this level. And very important is these type of forms are easy to extend, and they are loosely coupled. They are easy to extend and they are loosely coupled. They are easy to test. So they have a clean separation. So clean separation of functionality and presentation. presentation. So that is what important is. That means a clean separation with implementation and design, implementation and design, clean separation of implementation and design. So reactive forms, one more advantage here is, I will show you these all points. Another important is reactive form. Reactive forms are asynchronous. Reactive forms are asynchronous. They will allow to submit only a specific portion of form. Allow a specific portion of form. That means they support partial updates. They support partial updates. They make the form asynchronous. It also allows you can dynamically add or remove controls from form. So these are all the important points about the template driven form, reactive forms when compared to the template driven approach. Actually, the concept is not only this. This is strongly typed, not only that. For example, we designed a form. So you generally see here we have an option, edit profile. And generally in the edit profile, they have given some categories. So like account information. And they have given another category. So this category like personal information. So personal information. And they have given the another category like some security. So these are the options they have defined, security like options. And remember, this is an edit profile form. And usually we have a submit option. And generally what happens is when you design the form, so the template driven forms or whatever the forms that you design. Now in this, so many controls are there. Options are there. So in this also so many controls and options are there. And security, some controls and options are defined here. Now what happened is user haven't made any changes in the account and personal information. User made changes only in the security. User made some changes. And user submits. Usually what happens is this entire form is submitted. That means even you are not making changes into the data. So whatever the data is there in existing profile, this entire data is submitted. That means you are submitting the entire form, but actually you are making changes only in the security details. That means this makes application heavy every time to submit all details. So we don't want to submit all details. We can design the form in such a way that it can submit only the changes that happen. That means only this portion of the data will be submitted asynchronous, and it will allow to save. So those changes only, it will not update everything. So that means you can handle partial postbacks. These type of things that you have to achieve generally by using AJAX like concepts. So especially when you are designing everything through the UI. You have to implement lot of AJAX. Here Angular implements everything through asynchronous techniques, asynchronous methods, asynchronous properties at the logic level. So implicitly it is using all asynchronous. You don't need to explicitly write any AJAX, right? So it is implicitly using that asynchronous, which is actually AJAX. So that is one advantage of the reactive forms. Not only that, adding the controls dynamically, removing the controls dynamically. You can manage the controls dynamically, adding, removing, and managing the controls dynamically. So transforming the controls dynamically, all such things are very important. For example, when I opened account information, and here you can see several websites, they give an option like edit. They give an option like edit. So that means now what happens is, before I click on that edit area, actually account information, all these are displayed. Usually they are displayed with general labels. They are displayed with general labels. That means in a simple label that shows a username. And suddenly you clicked on edit. This label is now transformed into a text box. This label is transformed into a text box. Label is transformed into a text box. Technically, that is important. It is transformed into a text box. Not only transforming into a text box, that means now dynamically we changed the control. We added the control. We can even add controls. For example, suppose you are uploading photos. So generally when you are uploading photos, and to upload photos, they given a file upload control to you. Technically, they given a file upload control to you. So we have an upload control here. Now I want to add more photos, because by default they given only one option, and you say that I want more photos. That means I want to upload one more photo. So more. When I say I click on more, then automatically what happens is it will duplicate this control one more. I want more, it will duplicate one more. That means these controls are added dynamically to your form according to your requirement. If not required, they are removed. Dynamically, you can manage. That's what actually you can handle. That's what you can manage and handle by using reactive forms. Extending the forms, managing the forms dynamically, it requires very important. One second. Yeah. So technically, that is what is the purpose of a form that needs dynamic interactions. This is where we need all the reactive forms. That means dynamic. Not only just dynamic, we need a lot of asynchronous. That's what we need to do. So the library required for configuration and implementation required for implementation of reactive forms is actually the same library that you need for that. That is @Angular /forms, Angular forms. And the classes that are required, required to configure forms and controls dynamically to implement them. We have reactive forms module. So we have a forms module. These are the modules that we need. By using reactive forms module and forms module from Angular Forms library, you can create and configure the forms. We will see various ways how we can manage them. Some examples we will see how do we work with them. So a lot of options are there inside the template reactive approach, actually model driven approach. First we will see in this approach how we can configure a form control. So that means actually the form elements like text box, like checkbox, like radio, like drop down, or like list box, etc. All these, etc. All these are configured by using, technically they are configured by using form control base class. That is the form control base are configured by using form control base. So that means form control is the base for creating any form element. So any form element can be created, can be configured, So by using form control, that is the base. And generally, how you design the controls dynamically, what is the basic syntax for that? Actually, syntactically, the controls are created in this way. So controls are created in this way. So I want to create a control, then we have to just define. So element name, public element name is equal to new form control. And here we have to define the value for the form control and the options for the form control. Form control options means it will have all the attributes, other attributes, including validations and other properties for the form control. And after configuring the form control, here next important point is after configuring the form control. So that means this is how we configure the form control. After configuring the form control, the form control is bound to, technically we bound to. So any element in the view by using form control property, the form control is bound to any element in the view by using form control property. So we need to create a form control first dynamically and bind this form control to this. That means now you don't need any ng model. So directly, you don't need any two-way binding technique also here to implement. So event and property binding technique. Directly now the control, this element is binded to the text boxes. That means how you bind actually. Syntactically, how we bind that. Syntax, how we bind actually. So we have an input element. Input type is equal to text. We use form control property. Through that, we will define that element name we have configured in the controller. This is enough to handle the value and interact with the value. Now you can send the value from the controller to view. We can collect the value from the view to the controller. We can dynamically set value. We can update value. So into these elements. Generally, so you can dynamically so set value or update value. So into form control by using, technically we can do that by using the functions. We have two important functions. We have set value function, and we have patch value function by using set value and patch value function. That means generally syntactically how we define this actually. That means syntactically how we define that. Syntax, how we configure this actually. So this dot, so that is in the controller element name, whatever the element name you given, by using set value function, you can pass some value dynamically into it. That is how we can set the value. So that is how we can patch the value. Patch value is used for asynchronous update. That means you want to update only specific, not all. I will show you both examples how we can manage them. So first, what you are learning here is you are just learning how do we create a control, one form control, and how do we use this form control without using any two-way binding technique, how we can use the data, how we can interact with the data, how we can manage everything. Let's see one simple example for that, how we can do this. A simple example for designing and configuring this. Let's see. First, I will go to the project here and let's open an integrated terminal. Okay. Yeah. And let's add a component here. ng generate component reactive form or reactive demo. Yeah, reactive demo. Skip test. Skip test. Okay. And I'm just giving a reactive demo. Okay, let's keep this in the startup now. So reactive form, let's keep that in the startup. Yeah, reactive demo, that is reactive demo. Okay. And in the startup, reactive demo. Fine. So fine. Okay, this is the reactive demo is working fine. Okay, let's create an UI for this. So in the reactive demo, yeah, in the TypeScript file, yes, this is the location. And here we have to design a control. Generally, in order to access the data from any control and use the data, or in order to send the data, we have to use a lot of two-way binding techniques. So now here what we are doing is we are just creating. So we are creating a property, some txt name is equal to, it is a new form control. It is a new form control. And because our Visual Studio Code provides autocomplete technique, it will import the form control for us from form control. So in this Angular Forms library, form control from Angular Forms library, it will import that, it will configure that. So it will do that. So otherwise we have to manually add it, right? Already it have the auto implementation, we need to add the form control. So the form controls are created. The form controls are created by using this form control base. So it provides a form control method through which you can create a form control. Okay, so this is the class we created a form control. It has some method, set value, get value. Similarly, I want another control, LST cities is equal to new form control. Every element in the form, whether it is a button or a text box or a checkbox or a radio, everything is defined as a form control. And form control can have default value. So you can put some value by default into it. Currently, the value for the form control we kept empty. We need to define the value for the form control. We will see options and all how we can manage them. Okay, now two controls are created. We need to bind them to the view. Let's go to the view and design a view here. So let's keep this class as container fluid, yeah, and say register, okay. So and here we have a div. So let's keep that class as form group, okay. And here we have a label, and here we are defining as some name. So name, and we have a div with the text box input. So input type is equal to text. And here I'm just using so a basic class form control, that is the general CSS class. That is one form group. Another, we have a class as form group, and in this we have a label, and the label is some city, shipped to. And here I'm defining a select element, and with some option as Delhi and option as some Hyderabad, like this. Okay, we are configuring such options into this now. Now, important is here, we need to bind the content here. We need to bind the content here. We need to bind the content. We can access the content. We can display the content. I will do one more thing here. So then I will copy this. And I will keep this in a div, so and put a class. So here as row, and I just keep the div. So class as called 3. Okay. And another div. So here we will put the class as call9. And in the 3, so we just keep what we designed now. So that is going to get that and show in this here. Okay. And this select is also having a class as form control. Form control. Usually what we need to do is, in order to get the data from these controls and access the data, we need to use a lot of binding techniques, means two-way binding technique. Now what we do here is, this txt name is a form control, and we are binding that with this text box. And we can do that by using a property form control. By using the form control, we have to just use form control property. And observe here, it shows one warning. So reasonable. It says that the form control is not a known property. Why it is not a known property? Because it is not a known property because it is actually defined in reactive forms module. You have to import the reactive forms module. So what we need to do is, in the app module, so in the Angular forms, so in the forms module, you can see in the forms module, you have to import a reactive forms module. We have to import the reactive forms module, reactive forms module. So that means here, the form control, so that you have defined is binded using the form control property. So property, it is the member of reactive forms module, right? Reactive forms module. It is the member of reactive forms module. So it is the member of reactive forms module. So you have to import. So import. So the module into app.module.ts, right? That you have to do. That's important. So that means now I imported that, and here we need to use the reactive forms module. In the modules, we are adding the reactive forms module. And now this reactive forms module will provide a property as form control. It provides a property form control. And form control, capitalization very much matters. You need to be careful in that. This form control is binded to txt name. That's it. That means now this is a reference name, and under this reference name, so it is a reactive form control. It is a dynamic control. And whatever the value you entered, it is sent into this controller property. That means it is stored in this property. Whatever present in it, it will come and display in this. That we can do. We will see whether it is binded correctly or not. Currently, you can see it is empty. What we are doing now, here we are defining as a Samsung TV, and save this. And the value you have configured here, and you can see that. So when you refresh the page, by default, that value will be binded to that particular text box. It is binded to that particular text box. That means you can directly send a value, or you can keep this empty. That means we are just testing whether it is properly bound to that. Whatever value you send here, it is directly stored in this reference now. That's so simple. So that means we don't need to use any two-way binding technique now, just means ng model or anything. Just we have to attach the form control. And this drop down is also a form control. And this time it refers to elasticities. Okay. Then now how do we collect the data and display the data? That is also very simple now. So that means here we are defining. So product details, how we can display the details here. So we want name. So coming from here, and just how you can get the name, simple. You have to use txt name dot value. That's it. So it simply configures this. It simply configured this. Another data term is price. In that data definition. Here we defined as TX, sorry, not price, it is shipped to, and here we are configuring as, so it is, what is the option? We define LST cities dot value. You can get the value. So that means directly we are accessing the element value and configuring. Remember the configuration of the control, the manipulation of the control is all managed at the controller level, at this level. And you can see now it is showing like this. I entered some name and you can see it gets the details and display. I'm selecting that and it is displaying. So that is working fine. That's how generally we are managing the data. That means here entire content, that means here everything is designed. Majority here means manipulations related of options. Everything is designed in the controller. Suppose I want to update the data. Dynamically. I need to pass the data. Then generally, so we have an option like, so let's create in the register. I will just create another div and I will give this as a class as form group, and here I just give a button as update. So class as BTN and BTN primary or BTN info and BTN block. Okay. Now on the button click, we need to update the data. When I click on update, I need to update some data into these controls dynamically. That data will be sent into the view and displayed there. Then generally simple here, we want to set a value into the controls dynamically. So we will write, so update click method. On update click method, so we will access txt, this dot txt name. It is a form control. Into the form control, we will put set value. So we will say set value. We can set the values, we can set the validation also I will show you. We can set the value dynamically into this. What value you want to set into it? Some Samsung TV like this, the value we want to set into it. And similarly, this dot LST cities dot set value, I want to set the value as suppose Hyderabad. That is the value that I want to set into this. Update click should fire up when user clicks on this update button. That means on click. So we have to call that update click. So now everything is managed here at the controller level. And when I click on this update button, then it should, when I click on update button, it should get the data and update the details there. So initially it is empty, it's not having any details, and I click on update. So it sets the value into that. We are doing any modification in the data. So, and it will update that here. We are making any changes into the data. And when I click on update, then it updates with those details previous, what we have configured. So here you have just learned how to create a control. Means how do we configure the control? Now we have to learn how do we create a form. So we need to learn how do we create a form, how we can create the controls inside the form, how we can dynamically add the controls into the form, the manipulating of the controls inside the form. So that is important point we need to understand. So how we can configure the forms and the controls inside the form. Let's see that. This is an example. In this example, this is an example. So what the basic approach we need to follow here to handle this? In this example, first point is you have to go to app.module.ts, because sometimes you may miss this. And in app.module.ts, you have to make sure that you have imported the forms module. you have imported the forms module along with the reactive form module from Angular Forms library. So that is the first option. That is the first option. And make sure that you have defined in the module imports. So that means in the imports you configured that reactive form module. So make sure that you are configuring that in the imports. The reactive form module is configured in the imports. Okay. So we are doing that. Second step here, next here is we just added a component, add a new component. So, and any name you can give. So here I say reactive demo dot component dot ts. In this TS file, in the TS file, we are configuring the controls. We are defining the controls, and this is where we are configuring the control. And this is the logic for that here. And we need to bind this to the view. So reactive demo dot component dot html, and there we need to bind it. So here we need to bind that content, and let's define here. This is how we have to bind. Here you need to know only two things. So very casually here, only two things you need to know. So here in the summary of the control, what you have to know is form control. So is used to create a control, and that is one point. And form control property, it is used so to bind with the element in UI. This is what you need to know. You need to configure the control by using the form control, and we have to bind with the UI element by using this form control. You just learned how do we create a control. Now how we can create and configure the forms and nested forms means you can have a form inside the form, another form. That means how you can configure. So create and configure. So how do we create and configure? Yeah. So how do we create and configure form and nested forms. That means multi-level hierarchy of the forms. Means a form inside another form. How you can manage that? So create and configure forms and nested forms. For that, the point here is you can dynamically create and configure forms. You can dynamically create and configure forms. So it allows to extend the form and make it more asynchronous. So you can create a form. So by using form group, using the form group base. So actually form group technically form group is a collection of form controls. It is a collection of form controls actually. So all the form controls are kept in a form group. Currently in the above example, you have seen how to create a control. Now we can create a form group so that form group can contain a form control. Generally, so how you can create a form group? So syntactically, how you can manage that? To create a form group, so public, so we are creating a parent form. Parent form is equal to new form group. And this form group is a collection. That means it is an object. This is a form group object. In the form group object, we can define a control name. And control is considered as a new form control. Every control is considered as a new form control. We can add any number of controls. We have to define control name, a new form control. You have to configure a new form control. Now inside that, if you want to create a child form, so child form, so then you have to define a new form group again. inside that we need to create another form group again. So this is for child form. And in that you have to define again control name, and it is a new form control. Anywhere the control is form control, and anywhere the form is called as form group, you need to define that. So this is how generally we configure. This is how generally we configure. So the nested forms and forms dynamically. And in order to bind, actually to bind a form and a nested form, you have to use to bind a form and a nested form, you have to use the properties. What are the properties for form and form? For you have two properties. One is we have to use form group. Form group. This is for parent form. For parent form. For parent form, we have to use form group property. Form group is a property. We have to use the form group property for parent form. And for child form, actually for child form, we have form group name. Form group name. This you have to use for child form. So this is important. This is important to manage. This is important to understand. That means syntactically how you define actually. So syntactically how you manage this actually. We have a form. And we are defining form group is equal to, we have to define the parent form name. So parent form you have to define. Now inside this form, we need to configure another form inside this. Now comes the key point here. Why you need dynamic forms, creative forms actually is, suppose in any interview, if anybody asked you like, so we have a HTML page. In that we have a form and we have another form. Already we learned about this approach. Can there be multiple forms in a page? So the answer is yes, this is possible. We can have multiple forms in a page. Now, can there be a form inside another form? That means, can you have a form inside another form? Can you define a form inside another form? So technically, this is not possible. So you have to face a lot of issues. Then actually, generally, what is the point is when you cannot define a form inside another form. So there can be multiple forms, but nested form elements are not supported here. So then how you manage, because you are creating single page application. In single page applications, what happens is you will stay on that page. You bring another form into the current form. A form is loaded into another form. You handle the manipulations of that form inside the current form. So in that case, you cannot add another form element here. You cannot add another form element here. You need to just use any HTML container like a div, a HTML container like a div. Now this can have a form behavior by using a property form group name. And you can define the child form to this, to this. You cannot directly define. And very important is, so here one more option is, if you are defining a control in form group, then control is bounded. Control is bound to so bound to element by using the property. We have to use the property as by using the property as form control name. We have to use the property form control name. Actually, that is not property. We have to use an attribute. Form control name. If you are directly dealing a control without a form, then we have to use form control. But if you are dealing with a control inside a form, then we have to use form control name. You have to configure the form control name. That means syntactically how you manage that. That means what we have to do is syntactically we have input type is equal to text. And here we have to define form control name, and we have to define the control name, whatever the control name you given there. This is how we need to define a form control inside a form group. If a control is outside the form group, then you can use normal. If it is inside a form group, then you have to use different properties. In the above example, we don't have a form. We directly designed a simple control without a form. If you are organizing anything in a control, in a form element, then you have to use. And to set values, that means the methods used to set and patch values are same, no change. So we have the option like set value, we have the option like set value, you have the option like patch value. Patch value you will see now how to handle that, because we have nested forms, we can asynchronously configure and define them. Now let's see one simple example how we can create a nested form, how we can configure and create a nested form, how we can manage the forms. Let's see one simple example how we can define the nested forms. Configuring and working with the nested forms. Let's see one simple option. How do we create that? Let's go to the code now. So in the design, yeah, let's keep it that we will do some modifications. Now in the logic, we need to first create a form. Then we need one more option. So that is actually we need a form group. We need a form group for creating a form and a form control for form, for element. So we are creating, so FRM register is equal to, so it is a new form. Then we have to define as a form group. And form group contains some set of elements. Now here we have name. Name is a property. That means it is a new form control. So currently nothing inside it. After that we have price. Price is also a form control and nothing is inside it, default. So these are two elements inside the form. And I want to create a nested form. FRM details is equal to, it is a new form group again. That means we are creating a nested form here. We are configuring a nested form. Now in this, that means it is a child form inside the form. In this form, we will have city as a new form control. Anywhere the control is same and anywhere the form is same, any number of levels. So in stock, so it is also a new form control, We are defining this. So now a form is ready. That means we have a form inside another form. Our parent form is FRM register and the child form is FRM details. Now, how we can define the values, we will see later. Technically, how to bind this, how we can bind this now. Let's see how we can bind this and how we can define this. So how we can manage this. So in the column 3, so I am removing everything, and column 9, I am removing everything. So that is just, we have 2 columns configured there. In the row, we have this, okay. These are the 2 columns we are having, okay. Now, how do we design a form for the UI and bind with the form groups actually? So in this, I'm giving a heading, so register product, okay. And here I'm defining a field set. First, we need to keep a form, right? So we need to keep a form. Okay, let's create a form. Now we need to bind. So we need to bind the parent form to this form element. Then we have to do that through a property called form group. And what is it? And that is FRM register. That is the parent. Okay. In this parent form, you have 2 controls, name and price. That means we need to design those 2 controls here. So let's give a field set here and a legend here and simply say that basic info. Okay. In that we will put a data list with a data term. So with a data term here as name. So data term as name, and data definition. Here we need to bind with a text box. Input type is equal to text. How you will bind it? Previously, if you are directly dealing with a control, so we will put a CSS class here, class as form control. If you are previously binding with a control directly, then if you are binding with a control directly, then it's okay. So that means, so we can use form control property. But inside a form, if you are using a form control, then you have to use an attribute. You have to define an attribute, form control name, that is the property, that is the attribute. And the attribute, it refers to name. It refers to name. So that means it refers to the name. And remember, name, it should match with this property. And similarly, we have another data term. So that is price, and we have data definition. So here input type is equal to text, and it is having the class as form control. And here it should bind with the form control name. Form control name is equal to, it should bind with price. It should bind with price. We need to bind with the price. Okay. This is actually the field set that contains, it is the field set that contains the basic info. That is the basic info. That is the parent form related. In this, we have a child form. In that we have another, in the form we have another child form. That means here we are defining. So here we are defining another field set. We are configuring another field set. So in the legend, I said stock details. Okay, in this we will keep a div. And in this div, we need to keep, this is a nested form. Inside this, the second form information should come. Then how you can manage this as a form? Actually, you cannot write another form element here. So technically it will raise an issue. So dynamically when you are compiling and running this, then it will show an issue because there cannot be a form inside another form. Then how do you manage that? We need to design a container, and this container should work as a form. Then we have to define form group name. We have to define form group name. Form group name, this should refers to FRM details. Refers to FRM details. You cannot access that FRM details directly because it is a property of this parent. Only parent will be visible to you, but you can directly bind this from group name. Two options. The parent form is defined by using form group, and the child form is defined by using the form group name. We can configure. So see, it supports different types of binding techniques. So a property binding technique and attribute binding technique. Property binding means it should be available as a property outside that scope that I will show you in next level. Currently, it is not provided as a property directly. It is an attribute. Then you have to configure as an attribute. Because remember, so this is a member of this particular object. Then you cannot directly access them. You can create an accessor for this. Through accessor, you can pull it out and you can use it. That I will show you in the next level how we can do that. Initially, FRM details is not directly accessible. So you should refer it as a attribute, not as any property. Okay. Now in this, what we are defining is in the form group. This is the child form. And here we have a data list with a data term. So data term, and here this is city. And data definition, we will put a select here. And we will bind the form control here. Bind the form control. That means form control name is equal to, it should bind with city. And the class is form control. So that's enough. And in that we have two options. Here we have an option. We have an option Delhi, and we have an option like Hyderabad, like this. We are configuring that here. Next, we have to define another data term, that is stock. and data definition. Here we need to bind with a checkbox. Input type is equal to checkbox. And here we need to bind with the checkbox. In stock, we need to bind with the checkbox in stock. And here we have to define same form control name, and the form control name, it has to define with in stock. You should exactly match with those names. So that is how we are configuring the information. That means you are binding this here. We have a parent form, we have a child form. Now comes the interesting part here. This is the details available here. How you will access these details? So remember, all these are present in a form. All these are present in a form. And the main form, inside the main form, this is the child form. This is the child form actually. That is the child form. Inside the main, we have a child form. That means, for example, just for understanding sake here, so we have a form and border as 1 pixel solid. So that is the border we defined. So for that form, that means actually this is the entire form. And I defined some padding as some 5 pixels, so or 10 pixels padding. And you can see that that is actually the form and the controls inside the form. That is entire form. In that we have, this is in the parent, this is in the parent, and this is the child. Stock details are under the child. So just for a little bit more clarity, for these stock details, so stock details, so or this for this field set, I can keep some style, some background color is equal to some, so some background color, and we can have that with a different color. That means that is the partial form here, right? So it's not required just to keep a separation here, right? It's not required, just to understand that, fine. Okay, this is the design we are having. That means now we designed a form inside another form. Now how you can access, how we can access the content, and we can display the content of this particular form, means how we can access the details. So we have a form inside another form, how we can access those details. So it's very simple. Suppose how we can access the details. So in the next, here I'm creating and heading, right, product details. And how we can access the product details. So in the data list, we have a data term and we have name. How we can access the name? It's very simple. So we have to just refer to the object. We have to just refer to that object, that is FRM register. In that FRM register dot value, it will get the parent form. In that parent form, we have a property name. So which will get, that means this will get the parent form. In that parent form, you can have the name, and the name is returned here. Name is returned here. You are accessing the name, whatever name is there, it will display. Similarly, so price, how you can access this? It is directly present there. Then you can define FRM register dot value dot price. We can access the price. How about the child details, child form details? That means we want to access the city. And how you can access the city? Because city is present. City is present in a child form. Then we have to use parent form. In the parent form value, it will return all the parent form related data. In that parent form, we have a child form. Then we can access that by using FRM details. That is the child form. In that child form, we have a city property. We can access it. That is how we use a multi-level hierarchy. That is how you use a multi-level hierarchy. So that means this is an object. In that, this is a property. In that, this is the value. And similarly, that is a child form. So suppose say stock. And you can use some conditions here. So in the data definition, you want to display some data. And here we are accessing. So an approach here, we are defining. So FRM register dot value. So the value. So in the value, we have FRM details. In that we have in stock. In stock is a property. If this property is equal to, so returning a Boolean true. If it is returning a Boolean true, then question mark, we will say available, and colon, we will say out of stock. So out of stock, like this. And you can see that is what actually these options are defined into this. Now let's run this and see. This is how we can access the data from a nested form. And you can see this is that I'm entering the details, some Samsung TV, and it will get the details. And I'm entering the price, it will get the price. I'm selecting a city, it will get the city. I select in stock, it will get the data. So we are not using any two-way binding technique here. We are just creating a form. We are creating the controls inside the form, and we can manage the controls in the form. Now, very important is, so here, if you want to update the details, if you want to configure and update the details, now how it is asynchronous. Suppose I don't want to update basic information. I want to update only stock details. Or I want to update name from basic information and the city from stock details. So that means only specific controls need to be updated. Only those data need to be sent. Then how you can update that, how you can manage that. So partial updates, how you can configure that. How do we can update partial? Very simple. Actually, if you want to update partial, suppose you have to define a method. So I'm creating a method. So update partial. And what this update partial have to do is, it has to update only few details, set only few details, not all details. If you are defining all details, then you have to use the method set value. If you are updating only few details, then you have to use patch value. That means this dot FRM register dot patch value. See, if you use set value and try to update, then it will throw an error saying that price undefined, in stock undefined, if you are not defining them. Patch value will update only the details that you mentioned. That means patch value, okay? What values you have to patch? So we need to configure that. Patch value, okay, what are the values you need to update? I want to just update the name, update the name as some text, some Samsung TV, okay? So that is from the parent one. Then we have FRM details, this is the child form. In the child form, I want to update city as some Delhi. I want to update city, so here in stock, I want to update in stock as true. I am passing a Boolean value into this. This is how we are updating partial. We are updating partial by using patch value. You can update only those details. We can update only those details. And generally what we have to do is just below that form. So in that form here, we designed a form. And after configuring all these details, we will put a button and we will say update form, update details. And here on click, it has to call update partial method. And we will have a class. So class is equal to btn and btn primary, something like this, and btn block. Now what should happen when I click on this? It should update only that specific part of the details, not everything. That means you can see here, when I click on update details, only those details are updated. Only those details are updated. Price is not updated. Price is not there, not defined. So only specific details are updated. Suppose I am entering the price. I'm entering the price. And I am changing this here. I'm removing it. I'm removing this. And I click on update details. Suppose it is like TV. And I click on update details. Observe carefully. The price remains the same. Only the partial details are updated. It will not disturb this price. It will not disturb that price. If you are trying to do this by using set value, then it throws an undefined error for the price, because it is expecting price also. Because it is not an optional property, it is an required property. So better to use patch value to update the details. So that is how we have to manage the template forms. How do we define the, reactive forms? Means how do we create a form and how do we configure the form. Now here still it is not done. Actually, we have to learn how to add the controls dynamically. How do we remove the controls dynamically for the situation? For that, we need to understand about form arrays and form builders actually in Angular. So that we will see in the next session. Tomorrow, we will discuss about that. Tomorrow, we will see how to dynamically design the forms. That means adding control into the form and modifying the controls, right? Yeah.